Good evening, everybody. This is a supplement to the lecture, which is labeled question number 17 on Virgil's Aeneid, Book 1. I've posted the 2022 talk there because I think it does the trick, but I wanted to amplify a couple of things, so I thought I would do a short presentation here. I don't see anyone in the room, so I'll just record this and post this as a supplement. We have graduated from Plato's Republic, and we've done a huge quantum leap to Virgil's Aeneid. Virgil, in a sense, consciously tries to replace, for the sake of Augustan culture and morality, tries to replace the Iliad and the Odyssey with a Roman epic, something that would be a sort of a cornerstone of Roman education, and he was wildly successful. The Aeneid was, in fact, a mainstay of Roman education, Latin education, all through the Middle Ages, into the 19th century. Um, so, in a way, the Aeneid is a throwback. It is a simplification. The first six books of the Aeneid being essentially like the Odyssey, the Wanderings, and the second half of the book, 7 through 12, being like the Iliad, the war books. It's a primitive work, right? Because it ignores all of Greek culture and thinking in a sense. Of course, it doesn't really ignore it, but it tries to sort of get back to the beginning, as if the beginning could really be recaptured. The Trojan War is over. Troy is pretty much in ruins, and a small band of survivors leaves to reestablish the Trojan way of life. They're led by Aeneas, and he is not in the direct line of descent. He's not one of Hector's brothers. He's essentially a cousin. But he has a prophecy that he has to go to Italy and to establish a new Troy. All well and good. He only has 7 ships and a small, exhausted team of men. No women. There are no women on his in his crew. So, which is interesting sort of reflection on Rome, because apparently the city of Rome was founded by Romulus and Remus as a sort of a refuge for bandits, and there were only men originally. The women were acquired when they sort of tricked the Sabines to bringing their daughters to a festival in Rome. So this sense of only men traversing the sea to establish a new city, outside of the fact that there is there are mistakes along the way. This is recounted in book 5. They can't quite figure out exactly where they're supposed to go. They keep having stray adventures based on misinterpretations of prophecies. And then when they get to Italy, they find that the not only has there been a Trojan settlement in there before in Padua on the river Timavus, but the Greeks have already settled Italy as well, and the native Latin-speaking tribes have a flourishing culture in Latium under King Latinus. So Aeneas is always someone who, very much like Odysseus in Phaeacia, he's always someone who shows up when the show is up and running, when there's a going concern. There's really no need for his role as a founder. If anything, he has to be a destroyer before he founds anything. So in book one, really a cycle that arches from book one to book four is very similar to the Odysseus landing in Phaeacia um, um, motif in the Odyssey. Uh, Odysseus lands in Carthage, and he finds that a city has already been established, and been established by a Punic, a Phoenician queen who is a refugee, who's had to deal with the hostile tribes around her, but who has established a city that is very much like Rome was going to be, with theaters, with a senate, with ports, with temples being raised, columns being hacked out of stone, the workers organized into very efficient teams. And when Aeneas looks on at all of this work, he can only be envious, right? He's so far from his goal. And in fact, when he leaves Troy, he essentially, when he leaves Carthage, he essentially destroys it because he's broken the heart of the queen. She takes her own life, and the city kind of is frozen in time for a while. But the queen calls out vengeance on Aeneas. She says in this famous line, "Let there be a vindicator, let there be an ultor in the Latin word, like Mars ultor, Mars the Avenger. Let there be an avenger that comes from my bones." And she's talking about Hannibal, of course, Hannibal the great general who all but destroyed Rome in the years leading up to 218 BCE. Uh, so Aeneas, like Odysseus, is kind of a destroyer. He doesn't bring anything new to the table in terms of establishing civic order. Carthage already has it all. Um, the when he first stumbles across the settled part of the city, he's kind of incognito, traveling with his friend Achates. They find a palace, and or they find a temple rather of Juno, and the carvings on the temple are extraordinary. They're all about the Trojan War, and it's like he sees his life sort of recorded, right? And he says, "Oh, these people must know about us." Um, they've memorialized our sufferings around Troy, and he feels good about that. But it's basically it's depressing because he sees destruction and he can't reconcile himself to the fact that he's got to do something about it, right? And um, another famous scene in book one is when Aeneas meets his mother, and his mother Aphrodite, who's disguised, is has no sympathy for him. She says, obviously the gods want you to be here, or they would have destroyed you long before. And she, Venus or Aphrodite, says to her son, don't waste your time. Get to the queen. Make some sort of a pact with her. Get to know her. See if she'll be able to help you in your plight to get to Italy. Um, so Aeneas does not show any leadership on this score either. He has to be constantly prodded by his mother. One wonders whether or not this was some sort of historical illusion that maybe Ovid was making with regard to Augustus, that Augustus perhaps was too much in the control of his mother. We'll never know. But it's not unusual to think of Virgil as sort of writing between the lines. Well, the meeting up with Dido happens without Aeneas, because Aeneas, who has been sort of a day late and a dollar short, throughout book one, um, is not at the palace when Dido comes to meet the other Trojans. His other second in command, his other captains are there, and Dido is not only in complete control, but she says, she knows what it means to be a refugee. And she tells her own story. And she says, I will see that you are equals with me. I will welcome you here, and you can just be part of this kingdom. And I won't make any distinction, right? She has this sort of long-sighted cosmopolitanism. She's got this sense of we're all one people, right? We're all humans and we've all suffered the same thing. So we should all be part of one society with equal rights all around. And this is something that is absolutely uh, extraordinary, and it raises the spirits of these wanderers, right? Um, but they're not sure exactly how Aeneas is going to react. And Aeneas, at this point, comes in from he's made invisible by his mother, and now he appears. He tells his story, and he praises the queen, but he basically says, "I don't want any part of your kingdom. I've got my own kingdom to establish. I have my own. Zeus is sending me on my own mission." Um, and this is almost sort of like insulting, really, to Dido, because there's they don't seem to be in any position to do anything but try to survive this small group of lost and wandering Trojans. Um, so um, so Dido has to decide whether or not she's going to be to live up to this promise. And unfortunately, in books 2 and 3, what happens is that she falls in love with Aeneas, and her judgment becomes clouded. Um, but as before she falls in love with Aeneas in book 1, she's embraced this kind of ethics, which is very new to the uh, the epic world. This sense of cosmopolitanism. Now, it's very unusual in when you think of Homer, but it's not at all unusual when you think of Hellenistic philosophy. Both the Stoics and the Epicureans had a tradition of um, equality among men, sort of the universal brotherhood of men and women. And they felt that there should be no distinction between people of different ethnicities, no distinction between genders, no distinction between people who were enslaved and people who were free. In fact, the Stoics made quite a lot of this. They felt that slavery was basically an accidental condition, and it didn't have anything to do with the difference between one person and another. And in fact, some of the greatest writings that we have from the Stoics were written by enslaved people. So when Dido says to the Trojans that she wants to sort of welcome them, absorb them, form a society with them, she is transcending nationalism in this very profound way. Aeneas is not prepared to do this. Aeneas wants to establish a national territory with Trojan culture, with the Penates, the Trojan gods that he has rescued. At the end of book 12, when Hera, who is constantly, sort of making Aeneas's life miserable, she very much loves Carthage. When Hera and Jupiter finally see that there has to be some resolution, they decide that the Trojans and the Latins, the Italic peoples, are going to have to form a new society. They're going to have to blend together, and the Trojans will only remember their ancestral names. They have to give up their language. They have to give up their habits, their dress, um, um, their religion, and they have to essentially simply have their memory. You know, the only thing that's left for the Trojans when they meld into Italic society is the memory of where they came from. So the advance, I think, in book one here that you see in the character of Dido is this very philosophically grounded notion of cosmopolitanism, which just doesn't really uh, it doesn't come up in any kind of really strong clear sounding doctrine in Homer. There's always this sort of embrace of the human, what Thucydides called to anthropinon, the thing that's natural to men. But there's very little sense that you should try as much as possible to make the entire world one community, right? The Stoic notion of oikeiosis, everybody should really belong to one community. But Dido represents that, and Dido is not a Roman. Dido is a woman. Dido is a Phoenician, and so it's very brave of Virgil to put this kind of philosophy and worldview into Dido because it's not nationalistic in the way that that Augustus would have wanted him to be nationalistic. So okay, so much for book one. Please listen to also the lecture that I posted, which is ranges a bit more widely, and I will post another lecture tomorrow night, and I hope you are all reading and writing with great enthusiasm and with great benefit. And keep those essays coming. Thank you.